They called him a healer, a helper, a father every town dreams of. But behind the smiles, behind the white picket fence, a nightmare was waiting to be unleashed. This is the story of Arthur Finch and the night Maple Creek would never forget. Are you ready to see the darkness hidden behind the perfect American dream? Imagine Maple Creek in early spring. Picture tree-lined streets, the smell of damp earth and budding flowers, kids riding bikes past well-kept lawns. It's the kind of town that feels safe, predictable even. And right at the heart of that picture seemed to be the Finch family. Arthur Finch, known around town for his gentle hands as a physical therapist, helping neighbors mend and heal. His wife, Eleanor, often seen volunteering at the school library, her smile as warm as the afternoon sun. Then there were the kids, bright Seraphina, almost ready to fly the nest, thoughtful Oliver with his quiet curiosity, and little Nadia, whose laughter echoed in their backyard. They were, by all accounts, the embodiment of the Maple Creek dream. The perfect facade. But perfect facades can be terrifyingly fragile. Sometimes, they hide a darkness so profound it defies understanding. How does a man meant to heal become the agent of unimaginable destruction? How does a home filled with apparent love turn into the scene of a horrific family tragedy? These aren't easy questions. They linger, cold and sharp, in the wake of what happened. Because on a single, shattering day in March, that idyllic picture was ripped apart. Arthur Finch, the loving husband and father, ended the lives of Eleanor, Seraphina, Oliver, and Nadia. And then, he ended his own. A complete annihilation. A murder-suicide that left Maple Creek reeling in community shock, grappling with a truth too gruesome to easily accept. It's a chilling reminder that we rarely know the full story behind closed doors, the hidden battles raging within seemingly ordinary lives. The devastation is absolute, the loss immeasurable. Our hearts go out to everyone touched by this immense sorrow. Yet, beneath the grief, the question screams silently, why? What inner demons, what hidden darkness, could drive a man to extinguish the lives he was meant to cherish most? What demons lurked behind Arthur Finch's calm smile? To understand the path that led to Willow Lane that fateful night, we must first look at the life he carefully constructed and the cracks hidden just beneath the surface. So, who was Arthur Finch, the man behind the headlines? By all outward appearances, he was living the Maple Creek dream, a respected member of the community known for his quiet competence. His physical therapy practice, conveniently located just a block from the bustling Grand Plaza, was well regarded, known for its calm atmosphere and the steady stream of locals seeking relief. Patients like old Mrs. Gable, who saw him weekly for her arthritis, would tell anyone who'd listen about his magic hands and reassuring bedside manner. Such a kind, gentle soul, she'd often remark, echoing the general public persona Arthur projected. He wasn't flashy, not the type for grand pronouncements, but steady. Reliable. That was the word people used. If you scrolled through his social media, you'd see the curated highlights reinforcing this image, smiling photos with Eleanor at community events, proud posts about Seraphina's debate team wins, snaps of Oliver engrossed in a science project, or Nadia beaming after scoring a goal in soccer. Interspersed were serene nature shots, sunsets over Maple Creek Lake, misty forest trails, painting a picture of profound inner peace. All perfectly normal, perfectly calm. There were no angry rants, no controversial opinions, just the even stream of a contented family man. His Arthur Finch background seemed equally unremarkable in its stability. He'd grown up on picturesque Whisperwind Isle, an island known for windswept cliffs and a pace of life far removed from mainland pressures. Sure, there was that minor blip back in 1997, a teenage misstep involving trespassing onto private property. But that was decades ago. He'd faced the consequences, kept his nose clean ever since, and the incident was eventually wiped from his record. A youthful mistake, long forgotten, offering absolutely no warning signs, no hint of violence lurking beneath. He was, to the Maple Creek community, simply Arthur Finch, the dedicated physical therapist who helped to ease their pains, the present father cheering from the sidelines, perhaps a bit too loudly sometimes. Eleanor would tease, the unassuming neighbor you'd wave to while fetching the mail. He even volunteered to coach Oliver's t-ball team one summer, patiently showing hesitant 6-year-olds how to hold a bat, his voice never rising above a calm instruction, even amidst the usual chaos of kids that age. Everything about his life seemed meticulously constructed, a solid facade of normalcy and quiet success. He played his part well. Perhaps too well. To everyone who knew him, Arthur Finch was the epitome of quiet success and stability. But even the strongest walls can crumble under immense pressure, and pressures were indeed building, threatening to crack the very foundation of his life. That carefully crafted image, the one Arthur Finch presented so convincingly to the Maple Creek community, began to buckle under the weight of secrets he could no longer contain. Starting in late 2023, though few, if any, noticed initially, the financial cracks started to show. It wasn't one single catastrophe, more like a slow leak eroding the foundation. Whispers of overdue invoices at his practice, a missed car payment here, a slightly delayed tuition check for Seraphina's extracurriculars there. Small things, easily explained away individually, but collectively painting a picture of mounting pressure. The steady income from his physical therapy practice wasn't so steady anymore, fewer patients were coming through the door, while the overhead stubbornly remained the same, even increased. He carried the burden heavily, the Arthur Finch stress etching faint lines around his eyes that even his calm public persona couldn't entirely erase. He confided in his sister once, late at night over the phone, admitting the immense weight he felt, the responsibility to fix things, to maintain the life everyone expected. But admitting the problem wasn't solving it. He and Eleanor tried. They pored over spreadsheets, talked about tightening belts, cutting back on the little luxuries that had once seemed effortless. There were tense discussions about Seraphina's college fund, about pushing back renovations. They even put the small rental property they owned over in Ashworth on the market, hoping a quick sale might provide some breathing room. But the market was sluggish. Weeks turned into months, the for sale sign faded slightly in the sun, and the property remained stubbornly unsold, another hope dashed. Then came the bombshell, dropped quietly, almost shamefully, to Eleanor one bleak February night in 2024. He hadn't paid their taxes. Not just last year's, but for years. It was a staggering confession, revealing a depth of financial problems, a secret life of avoidance and mounting debt far worse than Eleanor had imagined. The struggling business wasn't just a temporary dip, it was a ship taking on water, and he'd been hiding the leaks for far too long. The unpaid taxes represented a potential tidal wave that could sweep everything away. How could he, the responsible provider, have let it get this bad? The shame must have been suffocating. Desperation clawed at him. The man known for his healing hands found himself moonlighting, driving late nights and early mornings for Metro Drive, the ride-sharing app. Picking up strangers, navigating the quiet suburban streets after dark, a world away from his professional clinic near the Grand Plaza. It was a way to scrape together extra cash, to try and plug the ever-widening holes in their finances, but it was also another secret, another layer added to the crushing weight he carried. The pressure wasn't just financial anymore, it was psychological, isolating him, fueling a growing sense of hopelessness. The weight of debt and deceit was crushing. Financial ruin felt imminent, but this mounting desperation was twisting into something darker, pushing Arthur's thoughts towards a terrifying precipice. As the financial walls closed in, Arthur's thoughts spiraled into a terrifying abyss. The pressure didn't just break his bank account, it began to break his mind, leading him down a path of horrific ideation. The crushing weight of his secrets, the looming threat of exposure and ruin, it curdled into something poisonous within him. The first truly alarming sign, a stark flare in the encroaching darkness, came via a text message to Eleanor in the dead quiet of a mid-February night. It wasn't a cry for help. It was colder, more chilling. He wrote about a plan, referencing conversations they'd apparently had, though Eleanor likely remembered them differently, perhaps as desperate hypotheticals she tried to shut down. Now, he spoke of it as a necessity. An escape. He couldn't take it anymore, he texted. And the children had to come with them. His reasoning was twisted, a chilling example of his mental decline. No one else could possibly take better care of them than he could. If he and Eleanor were gone, the children would be lost, adrift. Therefore, the only logical solution in his fractured mind was a complete, final murder-suicide plan. Imagine Eleanor receiving that message. The phone blowing in the dark, displaying words that felt alien, monstrous. Did her blood run cold? Did she try to reason with him, plead with him through frantic return texts? We can only guess. But outwardly, she clung to Eleanor Finch hope. Perhaps refusing to believe he truly meant it, or desperately trying to steer him back towards the light, she suggested alternatives. "We could start over, Arthur," she might have said, her voice perhaps trembling but determined. "We could move to the east, be near my parents. Leave all this debt, this stress behind. A fresh start." It was a lifeline, a plea for sanity, for a future. But Arthur seemed beyond reach. He didn't necessarily argue, instead, he retreated further into himself. The exhaustion became profound, settling over him like a shroud. He grew quiet, distant. Present physically, perhaps sitting at the dinner table, but his eyes seemed vacant, focused on some internal landscape only he could see. His energy, once channeled into his practice and family, seemed utterly depleted, consumed by the internal battle, or perhaps, the grim acceptance of his dark path. The desperation was palpable, yet paradoxically, it manifested as inertia, a heavy weariness. As February bled into March, the situation grew more volatile. Tax season loomed, a concrete deadline that magnified his financial panic. The fear of jail, of public shame, became an obsession. It was then he made the disturbing confessions to relatives, the words tumbling out in hushed, frantic phone calls or strained visits. He'd rather die, he declared, than face the humiliation of prison for the unpaid taxes. Die before going to jail. The words hung heavy, ominous. Then came the explicit Arthur Finch threats, shocking in their brutality. He would kill his family, he vowed, and burn the house to the ground. Burn it all down. These weren't vague expressions of despair, they were chilling statements of intent. Clear, terrifying warning signs. Around this same time, he quietly reached out, trying to acquire a gun. He asked someone he knew. The request, thankfully, went unanswered, the attempt a failure. But the failed gun purchase didn't derail his trajectory, it likely just shifted his method. The warning signs were screaming, but perhaps no one truly grasped the depths of Arthur's resolve. With his desperate plans solidifying and avenues for help seemingly closed, the stage was set for a night of unimaginable horror on Willow Lane. That descent reached its horrifying conclusion in the early hours of March 10, 2024. The desperate plans Arthur Finch had harbored finally erupted into violence within the quiet walls of the house on Willow Lane. For one resident, a young woman renting a room from the family, the nightmare began abruptly, tearing her from sleep. It was sometime between 2 o'clock and 2:30 a.m., the deadest part of the night, when the scream started. Not just a shout, but raw, terrifying screams that sliced through the silence. Heart-pounding, instantly awake, she froze, listening. Were they coming from inside the house? Closer now? Yes. Right outside her door. Panic surged. She fumbled with the lock, securing herself in, hands shaking. Minutes stretched into an eternity, filled only by the awful sounds and her own ragged breathing. And then, she saw it. A dark stain spreading beneath the crack under her door. Slowly, ominously, creeping across the floorboards. Blood. She felt trapped, paralyzed by fear, too terrified to move, to make a sound. How long she waited there, huddled in the dark, she couldn't say. But eventually, the primal need for survival overcame the terror. Knowing she couldn't stay, she forced herself to the window, somehow managed to pry it open, and climbed out into the pre-dawn chill, escaping the horror within. Her first call to 911 logged the distress. Hours later, well after sunrise, police responded. At 8:34 a.m., a patrol car rolled up to 3622 Willow Lane. The officers did their routine check. Knocked firmly on the front door. No answer. Listened intently. Silence. They even spoke briefly to a neighbor out walking their dog. Had they heard anything unusual? No, nothing. The house looked peaceful, curtains drawn, everything quiet and normal on a Sunday morning. A possible false alarm, they concluded. Annoyingly, they couldn't reach the original caller. The 911 system hit a snag trying to dial back the foreign phone number provided. A known limitation, something being worked on, but frustratingly unhelpful at that moment. Unable to follow up directly, the officers did a perimeter check, noted nothing obviously amiss, and departed just before 9 a.m. A tragic, unknowing departure from an active crime scene. Just 15 minutes later, dispatch received another call from the same number. This time, an officer sped back to Willow Lane. He found the tenant waiting outside, her face pale, hands still trembling uncontrollably. She recounted her terrifying tenant testimony, the screams in the night, locking herself in her room, the blood seeping under the door, her desperate escape. Now, seeing her state, hearing the story firsthand, the situation felt drastically different. Urgent. Officers converged on the house again. The front door was still locked tight. Peering through a side window, they saw a figure lying motionless on the floor, unresponsive to their calls. They knew they had to get inside, fast. Moving to the back, they found a door, drew their weapons, and cautiously entered the silent house. The scene that greeted them was gruesome. In the hallway lay Arthur Finch, deceased, his body bearing multiple stab wounds, surrounded by a chilling pool of blood. It was immediately clear this was a violent crime scene, a homicide. Moving methodically through the house, room by room, the true scale of the horror unfolded. They found Eleanor Finch. Then Sakurako. Then Oliver. And finally, little Nadia. All murdered. Later examination would reveal defensive wounds on their hands and arms, heartbreaking evidence of a desperate struggle against their attacker, their own father. The police discovery confirmed the unthinkable. The timeline suggested the violence had likely occurred hours earlier, coinciding with the tenant's initial screams, long before that first, tragically inconclusive police visit on that awful March 10, 2024. The terrible truth lay bare in the silence of the house on Willow Lane, a family destroyed from within. As the initial shockwaves subsided, the Maple Creek community was left to grapple with the horrific reality and the echoes of that night. The horror discovered on Willow Lane quickly spread through the tight-knit community of Maple Creek, sending ripples of shock, grief, and utter disbelief. How could this happen here? How could Arthur Finch, the quiet physical therapist, the seemingly devoted family man, be capable of such an atrocity? The community reaction was swift and visceral. Phones buzzed, hushed conversations took place over garden fences, and a heavy pall descended over the usually cheerful town. The Maple Creek grief was palpable, a shared wound suddenly inflicted on their collective sense of safety. Individuals who knew the family struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the monster depicted in the emerging news. Poor Mrs. Gable, Arthur's longtime patient, was beside herself. "I just can't believe it," she reportedly stammered to her daughter, shaking her head. "He had such gentle hands. I trusted him completely, to think he could, oh, it's just too horrible." Arthur's own mother, Martha Finch, interviewed briefly as she arrived from Whisperwind Isle, appeared lost in a fog of shock, unable or unwilling to process whether there had been any warning signs she missed. Meanwhile, neighbor accounts painted a picture of devastating loss. Mr. Henderson, who lived across the street, spoke fondly of Eleanor occasionally helping at Arthur's clinic and recalled conversations about Seraphina's bright future, dreams of becoming a nurse, excitement about exploring colleges, her surprising talent for cooking. "They were just a nice family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You see the kids riding their bikes, skateboards. It feels like part of your own family is gone. Dense, just dense tragic." Another neighbor chillingly recalled passing the children during their last week, making eye contact. "I saw something in their eyes," he stated quietly. "Like they were sad. I couldn't figure it out then, now." His voice trailed off. The schools attended by the Finch children became focal points for trauma support and shared sorrow. Aspen Academy, where Seraphina was a senior just months from graduation, quickly mobilized school counseling services. sending grief counselors into her classes and holding a special early morning chapel service. Emails went out to parents offering resources. Similar measures were taken at Riverbend Charter School, where Oliver was a well-liked 6th grader, and at Maple Creek Elementary, Nana's school, where the district's crisis intervention team provided immediate support. Recognizing the varied impact across age groups, local family therapist Dr. Evans offered advice to struggling parents: talk to your children, but do so appropriately. Reassure younger ones worried about their own safety, she advised, while allowing teens the space for more open dialogue, answering their questions honestly, even the unanswerable ones. Sometimes, she noted, just being present and offering comfort is the most helpful thing. As the days turned into weeks, the community sought ways to mourn together. A somber vigil was organized at the Maple Creek Park Pavilion. Hundreds gathered as dusk settled, holding candles that flickered against the growing darkness, sharing tears and quiet memories of Eleanor, Seraphina, Oliver, and Nadia. Friends spoke, teammates shared stories. Young Chloe, who played soccer with Nadia, voiced the lingering pain many felt. It's still hard to believe. Sometimes just seeing the soccer field, it makes me cry. Amidst the outpouring of grief, practical support also emerged. The Help the Finches Fund was established online by Arthur's eldest daughter from a previous relationship, Eliza, and her mother, Sophia, seeking donations to cover the overwhelming funeral and legal expenses. Maple Creek came together in shared grief, offering support and remembrance. But even as the community begins to heal, the haunting questions linger: could this have been prevented? And what lessons can be learned from the shadows that claimed the Finch family? The vigil lights may dim and the headlines may fade, but the shadows cast by the Finch family tragedy linger in Maple Creek, leaving behind grief, sorrow, and a search for answers that may never fully come. The story of Arthur Finch serves as a brutal reflection on the devastating consequences when hidden struggles curdle into unthinkable violence. It underscores the complex interplay of factors: the crushing weight of financial stress impact, the silent erosion of mental health, the desperate attempt to maintain a perfect facade even as foundations crumble from within. There are no simple explanations, no easy scapegoats, only the stark reality of lives lost and a community forever altered. This tragedy forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the darkness that can exist beneath serene surfaces. How well do we truly know anyone? What unseen burdens are carried behind polite smiles and curated online profiles? The unanswered questions echo long after the initial shock subsides. While the warning signs in Arthur's case seem glaringly obvious in hindsight, the threats, the withdrawal, the desperation, recognizing and acting on such signs in real time remains incredibly difficult. It highlights a desperate need for greater mental health awareness, for destigmatizing seeking help, and for robust systems of community support that can catch people before they fall into such deep despair. What are the lessons learned from Maple Creek's sorrow? How can we foster environments where asking for help isn't seen as failure, especially for those conditioned to project strength and self-reliance? How can we better equip ourselves and our communities to offer meaningful support to those in crisis, navigating the delicate balance between respecting privacy and intervening when danger seems imminent? Preventing tragedy like this involves more than just identifying risk. It requires a societal shift towards greater empathy, awareness, and accessible resources. Ultimately, this reflection brings us back to the irreplaceable lives cut short: Eleanor, Seraphina, Oliver, and Nadia. May remembering victims like them fuel our collective resolve to understand the complexities of human struggle and strive towards building communities where such profound darkness finds fewer places to hide. The questions remain, haunting the quiet streets of Maple Creek and beyond.